Welcome back to a Munchausen's Proxy, where we have learned our surprise that the Peripheral was renewed for a second season was shared by the CEO of Amazon. A little over a month ago, Amazon CEO Andy Jassy began to demand answers from Amazon Prime. Per a rather lengthy article on Bloomberg.com that goes into detail about Amazon Prime Studios' lack of fiscal responsibility when deciding what projects to back, which seemed to contradict what Jennifer Salke, Amazon Studios' head honcho, is said to have indicated to her staff after her trip to Seattle, Amazon's headquarters. And that is probably the biggest problem at Amazon right now. There is no cognitive dissonance between reality and what Jennifer Salke says about what is going on at Amazon Studios, because the head of the studio does not allow any negative information to penetrate her skull. She can honestly come out and say she has heard nothing but good things about Amazon's billion-dollar flop, The Rings of Power, because she does not allow anyone to tell her what a humongous pile of dragon shit that show is. And it is probably the same for other projects. Which brings us back to where I started this video. A month after the CEO was reported to be demanding to know where all his company's money is going when he gives it to Amazon Studios, shows like The Peripheral and A League of Their Own were axed after having received renewals at the end of their last season. They are blaming the strike, and it is probably the strikes they are going to use to cancel the contracts for the show. But I find it hard to believe that there is no connection between the Amazon CEO pitching a fit over the amount of money Amazon Studios is wasting on shit programming and this round of cancellations of shows they had previously renewed. For me, I was shocked The Peripheral was renewed because it was such a mess. For details on my exact thoughts, see the 8-episode spoiler review videos I did on the show's run. It was a show that should have been good given the premise and the literary work to base the story on. What we got, however, was a mediocre show that wasted a cast that had promise. Now, Amazon has not canceled all of its dead weight. It is still going forward with the Wheel of Time and the Rings of Power abominations. But that is probably because the CEO is allowing Jennifer Salke to salve her ego with those shows. Salke is bad at being a studio head, despite her previous experience. And how that is not apparent to Amazon corporate is beyond me. One of the first things Salke did when she took control of Amazon Studios was to cancel a Conan the Barbarian show that was in the works with the two showrunners who would go on to HBO and create House of the Dragon. For Salke, it was too toxically masculine. And if you look at the shows she pushes and the shows she tries to bury, there is a pattern. Amazon is embarrassed at the objective popularity of shows like Reacher and Terminal List because it gives their audience what they want. They pump up shows like The Wheel of Time, The Rings of Power, The Peripheral, and A League of Their Own, because they are the types of shows they want to see. Or rather, they are the types of shows she wants to see. All the signs are coming out of Amazon that Jennifer Salke is a Kathleen Kennedy clone, right down to idealized self-inserts into the shows she wants to hype up. For an example of what I mean, you have only to look at a picture of her and a picture of Morfydd Clark as Galadriel. And who she hands out money to also gives this away, the most notable being one of the latest in the $20 million deal she gave to Phoebe Waller-Bridge following the writer and actress helping to kill the Indiana Jones franchise for Kathleen Kennedy. Hot off destroying one male-oriented franchise, Amazon wants her to do the same to Tomb Raider for them after previously wanting her to do a Mr. and Mrs. Smith series for them with Donald Glover that eventually collapsed due to quote-unquote creative differences. All of this is a sign of things being very wrong with Amazon in particular and Hollywood in general. I have talked about Hollywood allowing people to fail upward in relation to other videos, specifically the Gotham Knights showrunners who had previously written for the failed Batwoman series on CW. So CW promoted their incompetence and gave them a new show to ruin. You would almost swear Hollywood was one giant money laundering scheme these days. Streaming services, in general, have this problem, and it is due to the nature of streaming. Terrestrial television, whether it be broadcast or cable, did not have to worry about constantly attracting new subscribers because their model was not based on subscriptions but on ad revenue. They kept popular shows running for years and years because they were guaranteed eyeballs for their ads. Until recently, streamers couldn't do that because new content means new shows to pimp to subscribers. Premium cable caught a glimpse of streaming's problem, but dealt with it by making sure the content they had on their channels was good, mixing newly released to cable movies that did well at the box office with increasingly cutting-edge original shows, miniseries, and movies. Warner Brothers' HBO was particularly good at this, way back in the late 80s and early 90s. And that worked. What streamers did, however, is get screwed. Netflix was relatively alone in their industry, and they made money via subscriptions and provided content licensed from other studios and channels that had shows and movies people wanted to rewatch. And as long as the ecosystem of streaming remained small, that worked. Sort of. Netflix lost money for many, many years before figuring things out, and they had little competition. Amazon Prime jumped in, and there were the free services like Tubi that showed stuff but had ads, but that was about it. However, Netflix was making money off of the studios, and the studios scratched their heads and asked their IT departments if they could do that themselves. I guess the IT guys got back to them with a shrug and a why not, because the next thing you know, every major studio wanted their own streaming platform. And this wrecked the ecosystem of streaming. Oh, and concurrently broke Hollywood. But that is a different video. When it was one small pond with a single big fish and a few small ones, things worked out economically. Now, all of those studios who licensed their stuff to the established streamers were getting streaming services of their own. Why would they license their stuff to Netflix and the others? Disney stuff would go to Disney Plus. Warner Brothers stuff would go to HBO Max. Paramount stuff would go to Paramount Plus. NBC Universal stuff would go to Peacock. The only major studios not to jump in with both feet were Sony and 20th Century Fox, and Fox got bought by Disney. The die was cast. Netflix's model was going to hell, and they suddenly started spending oodles of cash on more of their own content, and Amazon started doing the same. But the content, for the most part, was even shittier than the being pumped out by the Hollywood studios. And the subscribers were starting to notice. What could possibly save them from a subscriber collapse that would kill the streaming industry? Nothing anyone could foresee could fix this. Which is where China stumbles into the picture with their rather lax biowarfare lab security and a desire to make sure they weren't alone in the suffering. Only billions of people locked in their houses for months on end with nothing else to do but stare at their televisions for hours and hours every day could possibly have pulled the streamers' chestnuts out of the fire. And now that such a condition does not exist, the streamers are once more heading south. Of the major streamers, only Netflix is actually steadying the ship. The rest are floundering in a post-plague world. The problem with Amazon is that they don't really care. Amazon Studios is a vanity project, as I and others have pointed out. They could shutter the doors of the studio tomorrow and it would actually make Amazon a stronger company. But you would hear a deafening cry of lamentation and despair out of Hollywood because they are currently depending on the inflow of cash from Amazon and Apple. But Amazon and Apple would be fine. And because they don't care, they can drop $175 million on a mediocre show like The Peripheral and renew it for a second season. And they can drop $300 million on a show like Citadel nobody watched and was called generic by most of the critics I heard talking about it. And they can drop $1 billion on a dumpster fire like The Rings of Power and commit to 4 more seasons of the same. That, however, is during a booming economy. Such is not the case now, and Andy Jassy wants to know what the Jennifer Salke is doing with his money. He seems to be informing her that not canceling shows because it will hurt the showrunners / producers' feelings or be politically untenable is not how you run a studio. How she doesn't know this after being president of NBC is beyond me. But she has been heard to talk about how Amazon works in ways no business should ever run. It seems to be more about feelings and politics than about audience viewing numbers and money. She hands out multi-million-dollar deals like they are pills at a rave. Is that coming to an end? It is Hollywood, so I doubt it. The Peripheral was a show that probably should never have even seen the light of day. But there is something broken in the process of producing television and movies in Hollywood. Decisions seemingly are not made based on whether shows or movies will do well, but whether the right people are happy with them. I don't know if it is because they only test their crap in front of audiences drawn solely from Los Angeles, or if they simply cherry-pick the data that tells them what they want to hear. Given how Jennifer Salke talks about how things run at Amazon, I would not be surprised to hear it is the latter. It would not shock me if it is the former, however, or a mix of the two. Hollywood and its locale are very much out of touch with the rest of the country, and the world for that matter. And they don't care to hear about it since they look down on the rest of the country, and the world for that matter. The offerings they keep dumping at the box office and on television / streaming makes that quite obvious, even if many of the actors, writers, directors, and producers were not making a second career out of loudly and publicly telling all and sundry how they feel at every chance they get. See the current public meltdown of one Rachel Zegler for details. That is all I have for this video. If you like what I do here, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, share the video, and leave a comment or criticism down below. Make sure the bell icon is clicked so you are notified of new videos. It is all appreciated. Until next time. Tschüss.